do today is talk about debt management. And we're going to kind of approach this by looking at some steps for organizing and prioritizing your debt management. We're going to look at different financial tools to see what might work best with you, for you, because different things help different people. And we want to also talk about some potential money traps that might be out there related to debt repayment. And I'm hoping that as we go through tonight's presentation, if you came on because you have some debt you'd like to address, that you'll be able to build your own debt repayment plan. You'll start seeing what would work for you and start taking some notes towards that direction. So just to kind of get us going here, though, and see where we all are and recognizing that debt can be kind of stressful, I thought today would be a good day to ask everybody, what's your go-to stress management strategy? And maybe you can put that in the chat. It seemed like I was getting a lot of calls today, IMs about stress, so it just all seemed to come together. So I see pickleball, go for a walk, chocolate, take the dog for a walk, listen to good music, biking, audiobooks, chocolate. Yeah, chocolate's hard to beat. Bubble baths, did anybody say that? Talk to the family. Okay, great. So thank you for participating in the chat. If you haven't opened up the chat, you might want to, because that's where all the fun is. There's usually really great conversations going on over there. So find your chat button. It could be hiding under the more, the three little dots if you don't find it right away, or it's usually on your control bar up or down somewhere. Okay, so moving on. Before we get too far into this, it helps me to really know who all is on the call. We had a lot of people register, actually like 400. And so I'm just wondering who showed up. So if you could tell me your age, I would really appreciate that. And we'll just let that go for a second. I will say I thoroughly found taking a walk today with the warmer weather in Urbana was really a good stress reducer for me. So, okay, yeah, you can put it in the chat if the poll doesn't work for you. That's fine. We'll have that open just a couple more seconds here. And maybe one of my colleagues can snap a shot of that. So we've got that record. And I'll just let you all see it this time. Looks like we've got a really good distribution of people here. So it's wonderful to have you all on, and I really appreciate it. So thank you. Okay, so I do want to also just kind of start out by acknowledging that debt repayment can be very stressful. It could, it's an opportunity to try to pay down that debt and get where you want to go with your lives, but it's hard, and it's hard to talk about it. So if you're here tonight to build your own debt repayment plan, hey, congratulations, because you've really taken the first hard step, which is saying, I'm going to learn about this and I'm going to work towards it. So I really want to recognize that. And I also want to say, when you're working on something like this, don't hesitate to ask other people for help. Sometimes when we're looking at debt, it can just get overwhelming, and it might be very useful to talk to somebody that you trust in your family or friends, or a counselor, or somebody like that to help you. And if you also, another person that might be able to help you would be our Money Mentor volunteers. And these are volunteers through University of Illinois Extension that help people work towards their financial goals. And it could be about paying down debt. So I'm just going to put that out there in case you haven't already heard about this in our previous webinars. So, all right, so let's say that you've got some debt and you want to start thinking about how you're going to manage it. Really, I think the first step is to get organized about it. And this is a little easier said than done. Sometimes it might mean doing some digging to gather all the information, but we're looking for things like who's the debt owed to, how much, what's the APR, the annual percentage rate, what's the monthly payment. And then you might want to also make a note of whether or not it's a secured loan. Now, a secured loan is one where you have property, say like a car or a home, that if you don't pay the loan, the lender could get that asset. And we're going to talk more about this later in the presentation, but it's a good thing when you're organizing to pay attention to that and think about it. Okay, so these Emily just put into the chat. You can download a worksheet like this for free from Extension just to help you get started. Or of course, you could do it in a piece of paper or an Excel sheet or whatever you like. So let's say you're doing that, and let's take a look at how are you going to then explore which debt you want to maybe address paying down faster or paying more. And so in this example, Sarah has 2 credit cards. She's got a Smart credit card and a Brilliant credit card. And she's managing to pay the minimum monthly payment on both cards, but she has $30 extra right now that she could put towards paying down her debt. And so the question is, which debt should she add the dollars to? And I'm going to launch another poll here so that we can see what we all think about that. Do you think that she should put the her extra dollars towards the Smart credit card at 22% or the Brilliant credit card at 16% APR? We'll let that kind of go there. All right, the votes are coming in. Give you a couple more minutes. Anybody else got an idea about this one? All right, I think I'm gonna end that poll and we'll share those results. So most of you said that the Smart credit card would make the most sense. And, I would tend to agree here because it's the higher APR, which means there's more interest charge. It's costing her more in interest charges. So her $30 would go further to avoiding those higher costs on the Smart credit card. All right. So that one was pretty easy. Let's see about another example. In this example, now Zach, he has a variety of debts, all right? And he too has an extra $30 to pay on his debt after he's taken care of his minimum monthly payments. Now he's got an extra $30. So in this one, do you think, should he pay the debt with the highest APR first or pay off the smaller loan amount debts first? And I'm going to again launch a poll. Time out here. Now I'm launching it. So what do you think for Zach? He's got all these 4 different ones, highest APR or smaller loan amounts. And this one time, maybe some of you could explain why you vote one way or the other in the chat, because I'm not sure this one is, there's necessarily a right answer here. Why did you choose highest APR or why did you choose the smaller loan amount? Maybe we can put that in the chat. Okay, so one person said, oh boy, my chat went too fast. The smaller loans can be knocked down pretty fast, and that's really good. You can use something called PowerPay, which we're going to get to in a bit. Sometimes it's just nice to get rid of a payment and then apply that payment to another debt. Somebody else argues, but the highest APR does save you the most money. So psychologically, it might be good to have less number of debts. Okay, you guys have got it here. Let me end the polling and I'll show you that, it was pretty split this time, highest APR versus smaller loan amounts. And that's because what we really see is that often there is sort of a psychological boost to getting rid of some low debt. So for example, in this situation, Zach, he only has $80 left on this amazing credit card. Maybe he just wants to get rid of that one before he tackles some that have higher APRs. And these are really, these are all important things to consider. And again, one of those things where you have to think about it for yourself too, but we're going to keep exploring this. And I really appreciate all the participation in the poll and the chat. So really great responses coming in there that I hope you all can read faster than I can and talk at the same time. Okay. So some people must have snuck a look at my slides because they were talking about PowerPay in the chat, and that was the next thing I wanted to talk about. So there's a really nice online calculator from Utah State Extension called PowerPay, and it's free. And it is a nice way where you can go in and you can put in your different debts, and you just kind of put in the different information. And this is a screenshot where I put in our example, and it does all these great calculations for you. And it's so much faster than trying to calculate it yourself. And so in this situation, if they just, he just continued, if Zach continued paying just his minimum monthly payments, it was going to cost about $1,900 in total interest, and it was going to take 3 years and 7 months to pay it off. And that's, of course, assuming that he doesn't add anything to those credit card balances. But what you can also do with this calculator is take a look. Oops, I think I went too. No. You can also do something which is called PowerPay. And so what Zach's been doing, if you look at this over here on the right by the pink arrow, is he's been putting $325 a month towards his minimum monthly payments. And PowerPay is the idea that once you get one bill or debt paid off, you keep paying $325 every month, but you shift those dollars to a different debt. So here in this example, in November 2020, when the Amazing card was paid off, then he just increased the amount that he was paying on the electric store debt. And then same thing, when this Fabulous card was paid off, just kept shifting those dollars, which is called PowerPay, or sometimes it's referred to as snowball effect. And so that I've heard it that way too. And it can be really very powerful. Your budget is already used to that $325 amount or whatever amount you have, but it just keeps getting that debt paid down. If we look at this slide, you can see just how much difference it makes. So if the highest interest was chosen to be paid off first, which would be this first column on the left with the orange arrow, the savings was like over $700. If it was the low balance, in this example, it saves $675 in interest charges. Now, in this particular example, the highest interest versus the lowest balance didn't make all that much difference, but it gives you information. You can decide if it's worth it to you or not, which way you want to go. In some examples of some kinds of debts and things, and depending on the interest rates and all of that, it could make a bigger difference. But it also ends up saving a huge amount of time. Instead of taking like 3 years and 7 months, you might be done in less than 2 years paying it off with the PowerPay. So something to consider playing with and trying. And as Sasha said, it's free to use. You can come back to it and play around. You have a lot of other options too, like you can decide, oh, what if I just put $10 more towards my debt? What would it do? So I really like it. It's a well-designed tool. Right, remember, in the chat, if you have questions as I go to, please put them in the chat, and Sasha and Kamaya will help answer those. So we want to make sure that we address everybody's concerns as we're working through this presentation today. Okay, so we've been talking about organizing debt, but now let's kind of move on and talking about prioritizing debt. Now, ideally, we would all have enough money all the time to pay all our bills completely. And I'm not advocating not paying bills, but there are times in our lives and times and situations where we just can't necessarily pay everything and pay everything on time. And then you may have to make some choices and some priorities. And so really in this situation, when you're looking at debt and priorities, the first thing is to remember to keep yourself safe. And by that, I mean, particularly making sure you have enough shelter, you have enough food, you keep the energy, utility bills on so that you have heat, those types of things so that you and others in your family are safe. You also want to, though, think about debt in terms of legal ramifications and what might happen if something is not paid. So for example, If you have child support payments and you don't make them, there are definite legal ramifications and consequences of that. If it's a secured debt and you don't pay that debt, you might lose the item that is collateral. So those are things to think about as well. The next kinds of debts to consider are really those debts that quickly become very high priority. And again, home mortgages and shelter are a big part of that. And then other things that, are especially things that the federal government is going to get involved in, or government. So things like federal student loan, taxes owed to the IRS, real estate taxes, again, to protect your home. These debts also quickly become high priority. Now, interesting enough, and is that we haven't said anything about credit card debts being high priority, right? So we often, when I'm talking to people, I hear from them, oh, I have this credit card debt and I'm really, struggling to get those payments, but I'm not paying my housing debt. That actually is a little bit backwards. Lower credit card debt is a lower priority than housing debt because you don't stand to lose collateral, and it doesn't make you unsafe if you don't pay your credit cards. Eventually, you'll need to pay them, but they can be put off if you need to. But this is why debt collectors tend to be quite, like, they will call you and you will hear from them, is that they know they have to make that debt more of a priority in order for you to pay attention to it. And so some of these things, you will eventually remember you are still liable for them, but they may not be your first priority when you're having to make choices. Now, because we are in this very unique situation with a pandemic right now, we do have some different things that are helping people out with debt, and I just want to take a moment to talk about those and to point people to resources if this is something that would either help you or somebody that you know. So we have had some laws that have been passed, specifically the CARES Act, to help protect people who are having trouble with their mortgage or their rent payments, and as well as others, but for right now. And so if you are a person who is having trouble making your payments on time for your housing, you need to explore what your options are. And there are options now that are different than before the pandemic. The website where people are putting in the links for me right now take you to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which has extensive information about how to get forbearance where you don't have to pay your mortgage, and maybe for up to a year. And this date keeps getting pushed out. So right now, there is currently a federal rule that is from the CDC that is stopping evictions through March 31st. And Illinois has something similar through March 6th. And it's very likely those dates will get pushed again. They keep getting pushed, but eventually those bills will be due. But do look into that. Also, just to let you know too, that there is in some communities help, as in paying your bills for home mortgages or rental payments, and you might need to be asking about that too. So again, we also have laws that are protecting people who are renting right now to help them avoid eviction. And so if you live in Illinois, you can call 211 no matter where you are in Illinois, and ask about local rental assistance. And I would highly encourage you, if you're having trouble with those kind of payments, to explore this. All right, am I missing any questions? It seems like a lot of stuff is going by. All right. Colleagues, if there's something in the chat I need to see, make sure you give me a holler, please. All right. One more thing I wanted to mention that is different this year because of the pandemic, and that is health insurance availability. So medical expenses can add up very quickly, and they are a very common source of debt for people. And if you are in a situation right now where you have lost health insurance coverage, or you just think that it's costing you a lot, you may want to explore your options at the ACA Health Insurance Marketplace. Because of the pandemic, there is a special enrollment period that is opened up. Typically, it wouldn't be open right now, but it is. So you may definitely want to explore and see if you can get health insurance there that would cover you and your family well at a lower cost. So just wanted to bring that out for people. Okay. Okay, and so now we're going to move on, and I'm going to turn this over to Sasha and let her talk for a moment.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
So one of the things I think that's important to discuss is like part of developing a debt repayment rule or plan may incorporate a significant other or significant people in your life or in your household who share financial resources with you. So it could be a spouse, could be a partner, it could be an adult child. So beginning to have these conversations about debt repayment can be challenging. So one communication strategy that might help you is iMessages. And this is actually something we talk about a lot on our podcast. So we'll, if you want to know more about that, I'll put that in the chat once I'm done speaking. But we talk about talking how to have these conversations around money all the time. So Kathy, if you want to go to the next slide, please. So iMessages help to communicate. It kind of also takes the stress off of making the blame of someone else. So it builds trust. It also uses just describe how am I feeling? I'm feeling angry. So I get really angry when food is wasted because I have to work really hard to pay for it. So I might say things like, please put the milk in the refrigerator when you're done using it. I don't know why my spouse does this. He seems to leave the milk out. It makes me very angry. But next slide, please. You definitely want to avoid you statements when we're talking about having a discussion, especially about personal finances, like your credit is terrible, or you don't pay the bills on time, or you're so lazy because you never put the milk away. So avoiding those you statements can really help us to kind of diffuse the tension in a household when we're talking about having conversations with our partner. So one of the things I was hoping that in the chat, if you, Kathy, you want to go next slide, please, is that if you overspend all the time, if you could change this to an iMessage in the chat for me. Whether it's what, I feel or when this happens, but if you could rephrase this, you overspend all the time. Our finances are a mess. How would you rephrase that as an iMessage? It's like, I'll wait for the chat to come in. I feel like this is something my spouse says to me all the time about I overspend, which is kind of funny, but I feel we should talk about our spending habits. Oh, that one's a good one. Anyone else? I'm concerned that we might be overspending. Perfect. Concerned about our finances. I'm so stressed. We need a spending plan. I feel anxious about our finances and would like to talk about them. I feel we need to work on our finances. I'm very concerned about our finances. Can we talk about our spending plan? Oh, these are all wonderful. So if you want to continue putting them in the chat, please feel free. I love reading from the chat. But of course, I think the one thing you have to really think about is like listening for understanding and listening for certain words, the I feels, those are really important. I think feelings are important when we're talking about listening. And if you don't know how someone's feeling, you just have to be really mindful of like what they're saying so you can kind of understand a little better. And of course, listen for voice. When we're talking about listening for, when we're talking about like, I'm really mad versus like, I'm really mad. There's a difference there. And then of course, body language with that partner or spouse or that adult child, and definitely give that person the time to speak and listen. Listening is really hard for most people. I can tell you all about it from my Mr. Rogers presentation, but listening is really hard. So listen as best as you can. And of course, we want to make sure that, what are other strategies for beginning a hard conversation? So one of the things I did when I had a hard conversation with one of my family members was I trapped them in the car. It might not have been the best, but so what are some other strategies you guys could put in the chat that you might have a hard conversation? I need your help with something. We need to work on this together. Those are great. Like I said, I just trapped my parents in the car and we had the conversation. I was like, we're going to talk about this. And it's really uncomfortable. When is a good time for us to talk? Go for a walk, start with a positive, then move into the negative and end with a positive. That's a great one. Oh, Gretchen says always have chocolate. That sounds amazing. I'm down with that, Gretchen, every time. I need to get your input on something. Awesome. Sit down for a cup of coffee or glass of wine. All those sound like good things. So, those are great strategies, and please continue if you think of a few more strategies you'd like to discuss. But I think I'm now going to hand it over back to Kathy.
Thank you, Sasha. I appreciate you stepping in there and letting me catch my breath a little bit. All right, so conversations can be a challenge, but a good thing to practice. And even the I statement still feels sometimes a little odd when you first start, but when you start doing them, it becomes more natural. All right, so moving on to step 3, we're going to talk about different kinds of options that are out there for dealing with debt. When it's, a little bit overwhelming, or you have more things and you're looking for other options. I'm going to go over some of these pretty fast because they may not apply to too many people in the audience at one time, but we're going to give you resources so you can dig into them more. But I wanted to at least cover things a little bit. Okay, and so hold on to your hats, and here we go with options. All right, so one of the first ones I do want to bring up is to be careful about the minimum payment trap. And so, when you get your credit card bills and it says this is the minimum payment you need to make, there's been research that has shown that is sort of like sets it for you. And most people won't think to pay more. But a lot of times that minimum payment is really kind of set up, calculated so that it takes you forever to get rid of that debt. So in this example here, you can see somebody had a balance of $3,000 and their minimum payment was $90. And if they only paid the $90 a month, it would take them 11 years and about $4,745 to pay it off. But if they could just put in an additional $13 and pay $103 a month, they could get it paid off in 3 years and save over $1,000 in interest charges. So, take a look at that minimum payment. Obviously, try to make that amount. But if you can pay a little more, it might really be worth it to you, especially in the long run. We do a lot of times hear a lot of advertisement about debt settlements or debt relief services. You might hear them on the radio or the TV or in social media saying they can, take care of this all for you. And there are, different counseling services, credit counseling services that sometimes can help you renegotiate, but be aware that when you're working with somebody that is debt settlement, there are some things that you need to know. Number one, if you stop payment on your debt, people typically don't, number one, want to negotiate with you anymore. So if you are approached or you start talking to somebody and they say, well, the best thing to do is first to stop paying your debt, really rethink that, okay? You're going to end up with fees and charges, and it will definitely affect your credit report. So no matter what somebody tells you, that is the way it is. Keep in mind also, debt settlement companies cannot legally ask you for upfront fees. So you don't need to pay before something happens. If you do have debt forgiven, there is a tax consequence, and you might want to understand that before you settle into any contracts or go too far. And overall, according to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, when dealing with a debt settlement company is really considered pretty risky. So you need to understand your legal rights and make sure that everything is going along the way that it should in the best of way of your interests. Now, when we are talking about consolidating loans, that's a little bit different. Typically, what consolidating loans is when you take out a new loan to combine and pay off other loans. It doesn't erase the debt, but it might mean instead of making 3 or 4 different payments, you have one payment to make. This is something that a lot of times students will do with their college loans if they have a whole bunch of different ones from different semesters, and people may do it in other ways. It's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It may very well lower your monthly payment and make it more manageable now, but keep in mind that it's very likely that it will take longer to pay it, and you may very well pay more over time. And also sometimes when people do consolidate, say, several credit cards without closing any credit cards, it can be tempting to then charge more on those credit cards that now don't have charges on them. So if you do consolidate loans, be careful that you don't add in more debt because there's some opportunity there. And again, remember, there's room in the chat for questions. Okay. Home equity loans. Now, a home equity loan is based on when you have a mortgage, but you've been paying off of it, making payments on it, over time. And so you have some equity. You've paid down that mortgage, and there is equity in that. So the equity is no more than the difference between your home's current market value and the mortgage balance due. Well, that is the equity. The amount your loan will definitely be no more than that. And so the advantage to a home equity loan is that you typically can get a relatively low APR interest rate loan, especially right now, they're very low. However, the disadvantage to it is your home is acting as collateral. And if you remember, we talked about secured loans. This is definitely a secured loan. And if for some reason you cannot make the payment on that home equity loan, you risk losing your home. So you need to think very carefully about using this, especially if you have credit card debt and you're then transferring what's really a low priority debt to a collateral debt. That's something you want to think very carefully about before you do. But everybody knows themselves their best, and sometimes this is an option that can work for people if they really have a plan in place and feel confident that they can follow through on it. So bankruptcy can be an option for somebody who has a lot of debt. And if you think that this might be a good option for you, then I really would suggest talking to an attorney. I am not an attorney, so I'm not going to give any advice about this, other than to say that bankruptcy is a way to get a fresh start. Now, remember that not all debts will be erased by bankruptcy, and that's why you need to gather more information about it and to understand it in order to know whether this is a really good idea or not. The question here is, are home equity loans only taken out through the mortgage lender or other institutions? That's a great question. Typically, it's a second mortgage. It's usually, I think, easier to get it at with the same lender that has your mortgage in it, but I'm not sure that you're required to do that. So I'll have to look that one up, Joan, and get back to you. Okay. So it may be that sometimes people do end up in a situation where a debt will get turned over to a debt collector because something hasn't been able to be paid. That's certainly been something that we've seen quite a bit lately, as well as with medical debt. And so when you're working, if somebody is calling you or contacting you to collect debt, there's some things to keep in mind. One, typically a debt collector is trying to get a person to agree to a certain payment plan. You want to avoid making any payment commitments that you can't keep. So sometimes it's sort of like, you just like to say, yes, I'll do that, fine, just stop, don't call me anymore. But really, you have an opportunity to possibly do some negotiating about how much the payments can be. And you have more opportunity to negotiate the first time than if you can't make the commitment and you have to go back. So keep in mind that debt collectors are people too, and they are trying to work with you. So as much as possible, keep that in mind. It's a very stressful situation. I understand that. But also know your rights so that if you are being contacted by a debt collector, it can be useful to understand your rights. So we're putting some information in there. And Seisha used to be a debt collector before she became a consumer economics educator. So, ask away in the chat. You've got an expert on hand here. All right, so moving on, let's see if we can get a little creative here and think about this. So we have another example. In this example, Jess has debt payments that have really add up between a small truck loan, a furniture store loan, a credit card loan, and so total of those monthly payments is $560. When Jess sits down and figures out their monthly expenses in the things that they must pay for, then they realize that they just don't have $560 to put towards that debt. Jess has only $450 a month available. So things happen when things are tight. And so what are some of the options that Jess might want to explore to manage this situation? All right, so it's got debt that's adding up to 560 and they only have 450 to put towards it. What would you suggest Jess thinks about? And I'm going to go back to the table so we can see it while we work on this in the chat. What might be some options for Jess? A side hustle, like get a second job or a second gig and bring in some extra money. Okay, good idea. What else? Baking for extra money. Okay. Could be a good side hustle. Sell the truck. It's an asset. They could sell it, perhaps depending on how long he's had it and things, pay it off that way. Contact the debtors for any possible relief plans or renegotiate the time period. Call mom. Could the furniture be, returned, sold? Good questions. Refinance the auto loan for the truck. Good. Possibly consolidate the 3 debts. That's a possibility. Yep. Good. Lots of good ideas. Ask siblings. I know I'm missing some. That doesn't mean I don't like them. They're going fast. But hopefully you can all open up your chat button and take a look at those. So lots of good ideas there. And this is where it can sometimes really be helpful to talk to other people, because we tend to get sort of tunnel vision with our own debt management. And sometimes there's some options there that we haven't considered. So that's something to think about. And none of these will be the right answer for everybody, but I think it is helpful to think broadly and then to look at them and say, well, these are the ones I'm comfortable with, or these are the ones that I could work with. So Gretchen asked a question about debt management plans through American Consumer Credit Counseling. And I thought I had that coming up here, but perhaps I don't. So let me just address that. The nonprofit credit counseling groups tend to be helpful for people, but they do charge a fee still, even though they're nonprofit. So sometimes it's useful to think about what are you willing to do and what aren't you willing to do. It's worth asking about them and asking them how their process is. Sometimes they have rules about working with you that may not be comfortable to you, or they might be comfortable to you. So they are a definite possibility. But again, really good to get an idea of what is the strategy that'll be used, what is the cost, and how does that work for you. Okay. I think most of these probably went by in the chat, but let's just look at those. Typically, when you're working to renegotiate debt with a lender, some things that you can ask for is a lower interest rate. I don't know if I saw that one, but sometimes they will lower the interest rate. Ask for, if you find that you're always charging up to your credit limit and it's more than you want to be carrying, ask for a lower credit limit. You get to set that amount. There's no reason why the credit card companies should set that. Sometimes just even changing when the bill is due can be helpful. Maybe you have too many big bills coming in for your first 2 weeks of paycheck, then it would be helpful if it was a little later. And just even, setting up a payment plan. When you're working with a lender, make sure you put all agreements in writing and keep documentation so that you know what you said, what they said, and everybody has seen it and agreed. Now, we're not going to talk too much today about student loan debt, but I did want to just bring it up because I know it is a big part of debt management and repayment. Typically what I want to tell you about student loans, I tell you the typical stuff, and then I'm going to tell you what's happening right now during our pandemic, all right? So with student loan debt, number one, compare your options. Don't assume that the default option for repayment is best for you. Again, for different people, different things is going to work out. Be very wary of combining private and federal student loans. Federal student loans tend to come with a lot of options where you can change payment options as your situation may change. If you consolidate the federal and private student loans, merge them together, you lose those options typically when you move, because by consolidating them, you're going to move if you move them into a private loan. So you can consolidate federal loans and you can consolidate private loans, but think twice before consolidating them together. Again, sometimes some communication materials and documentation with student loan lenders disappears or gets lost as lenders change. So make sure you keep your own documentation. As we said earlier, I think student loan debt does not go away with bankruptcy. I think I said that, but it is true. So don't ignore it. It will be there. And if your financial situation changes, like you do get a raise or you start a new job, revisit it and see if that's something where you want to start paying more of it off quicker. I really do like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's website on repaying student debt. So I think that is a great place to kind of check out your different options. So that's our sort of typical thing I tell you, but now we're in a pandemic. And so we have a little bit different thing going on. And so right now, all federal student loans payments are suspended through September 30th, 2021, which is a few months away still. And so what that means is that you do not need to be making any payments for your federal student loans. This does not apply to private loans. And so it most likely went into an automatic suspension thing, but you could double check that to make sure that that is working the way that it should be for you. But you do have choices. If you want to be paying them off, you can still pay them, but you just have to talk to the lenders. The interest is not accruing. So it is reduced the interest rate to 0%. So you don't have to worry about that. And if you are in a payment plan where it was like a public service loan forgiveness where you have to pay for X number of years, these payments do count, or these months of non-payment do count towards that time period. So this might be a really good time to take the money that you've been putting towards student loan debt and put it towards either reducing other debt or saving for other goals. So something to think about. Now, we do a webinar once a year through our Get Savvy webinars series on student loan repayment, and we have a recording of it from the last one we did last spring, so you can listen to that to learn more. But we're also going to be doing it in April, which is coming up really fast. So we will have a redo if you want to register for that, and Emily's put both of that pieces of information in our chat there. Whew. Did we talk about a lot of different things and a lot of different options? I felt like we went through quite a bit there. Hopefully I didn't overwhelm everybody. So basically, let's come back to where we started. What are we going to do for debt repayment? First, get organized, pull those documents together, figure out what you owe, who you owe it to. Then start looking at your options and think about, of these different options, what's the best thing for you? Do you want to try power paying your debt? Do you want to try getting rid of some of the debt? What is going to work best for you? Getting a second job to get it to go down faster. These are just all different ideas. And I'm not saying that by any means that you should be doing any one of these. These are things you have to think about. So research those options. But also, as you're doing researching those different debt options, ask questions. You have the right to understand things. Questions are good, and read those contracts. Yes, and as Asia said, if you have a spouse or a partner, discuss it together too. Do you have a trusted friend? Run it by them and see how that sounds to them, and make a plan so that you can get started on paying down that debt. All right, so we're gonna take questions here, and I see them still coming in, but I'm gonna do a couple other things while we're getting those questions in. One, I am gonna launch one more poll. Because we are federally funded, we need to ask for this demographic information so that we can show who we get to interact with and who comes to our webinar. So if you would please fill out the poll, it helps us a lot. And this, I'll let that run. So there's a question in the chat about transferring balances to zero interest offers. And so again, this comes back to, this could be a really good option, but you need to be careful. You need to definitely read it very carefully and make sure that you understand what could trigger, like it all being due at one time, or how does this end up, changing to interest charging. So you always want to look at that very carefully. I have had people tell me that this works for them, but often when I ask them, did it keep working? Then they tell me about a time where they made a mistake and then it cost them more. So I do say, be wary about it. And I'm going to go ahead and end that polling. Thank you, everybody that put it in. And let's see what else. Yeah, that's basically what I was trying to say, Joe, if I didn't say it right. So. All right. Now, we talk about debt a lot, and we have a podcast. And our podcast is called Family Financial Feuds. And one of the podcast sessions is Make a Dent in That Debt. So if you'd like to hear us talk about debt more, and you'll get to hear a lot more of Seisha and Kamaya, which is much better, go ahead and check out our podcast. And I also wanted to remind everybody about Money Mentors. We do have volunteers who can help others with debt management, but not in every place in Illinois. We aren't quite that big yet. So if you live in one of these Illinois counties that is listed, then that might be something you might want to consider trying. And then, of course, we're always looking for feedback so that we can get better at what we're doing. So if you would be so nice as to go to this survey and, let us know what you thought. Give us some feedback on it, and then that helps us improve when we do it again.